Welcome to my morning coffee. Always bold, hot, and full of flavor. Gia and Tonya are my morning coffee. What's in your cup?
Well, happy Monday.
Hello,
Welcome to another
hello.
edition of
Happy
My Morning
Monday.
Coffee. Yes, we are back. So in case you didn't know, that's not Gia. That's actually the voice behind the My Morning Coffee brand. So let's welcome today her stand-in and our voice of the pod, Jeffrey Sneed. Hey, Jeff, how you doing?
Hey, how's it going? How's it going, everybody?
Hey, so listen, what's in your cup and what's on your chest? Is that okay to ask?
Yeah, because I'm not getting this off of my chest anytime soon. I don't know how well you guys can see it. That's a little better. Execute. So let's start with the cup. In the cup, I have Dark Magic coffee.
Dark Magic.
I like
Lord
it strong. I like it bold, and I like it full of flavor.
Okay. But the magic, like, where does the magic come from? What?
Hey, this is a Keurig line coffee. It's just a dark roast, so they call it Dark Magic. You know,
Dark Magic. I like that.
make it do what it do.
Okay.
Execute.
So what you been up to? Tell us about this weekend and
Well,
the Execute launch, because you were definitely a part of that.
Yeah. So for those who aren't in the know, the wife relaunched in a bold way her redesigned website. And it's actually the introduction of not only the Mahogany Box, even though you go to themahoganybox.com to get there, but it's also the introduction of the Mahogany Box Marketplace. So the site is not only a place to sell Mahogany Box wares, but it's also we're envisioning it as an aggregator site where you can find other businesses as well. So we've got a couple pages up. Most so far are in-house. My voiceover site is connected to the Mahogany Box Marketplace, as well as my partnership, the catering company KJ Catering, is linked there. And I'm not sure, but I think there even may be a Sand and Shores link there. If not,
I think there just might be.
So we really want to be a place where folks can come and feel confident that they can find Black and or women-owned businesses, small businesses, and see it as a referral, quite honestly. So on the Mrs.'s birthday, January 1, we launched the Execute campaign, which is taken off leaps and bounds. And we've had folks who like, can I have this color or that color? And you see, so for the men, the X is a different color so far. And for the women, the cute is a different color. Execute.
We actually have a little video real quick. You want us to show it?
Oh, hey, I didn't realize that, but make it do what it do.
All right.
Every single day, I'm gonna make something great. That's my way. Every single day, I'm gonna make something.
Hey.
All right. right. And there are more to come. There were a few folks who were in the loop who, for a variety of reasons, couldn't execute on the day, but we will see them, and that reel will get longer and more varied as we continue to move on.
And
So yeah,
we'll
I'm
continue to
happy
show
for
that.
Gia. I think she's real
Yeah.
excited about what has happened so far and where we're going. So it's real cool.
Hey, tell us about you guys went out to eat somewhere special yesterday.
Yeah, so here's a great example of how we Black folks need to support and learn and move quickly, execute on opportunities. So Gia and I were invited to a 50th birthday dinner party on the 30th. So in the world of COVID, nice, relatively small, intimate group of grown folks. And at the party, I met a gentleman, Kelvin Bellamy, who told me about his business, and he is the executive chef at Kai's Table in downtown LA. So a chef, Black-owned business, downtown LA. We get so used to thinking that everything that involves Black folks in Los Angeles is in South LA somewhere. So downtown LA gives me the address, 1091 Hope Street. I'm like, well, wait a minute. That's not too far from the arena / center / LA Live. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking, wow, they probably do a whole lot of transitional business that can't get into other places down there. But anyway, so we said, hey, you open on the holiday? We already had plans, but we were kind of checking it out. So we went yesterday. So meet on Thursday. Boom. We take a crowd. There were 6 of us. Went to Kai's Table. Immediately met Kai. Hung out with Kelvin. Just a really, really cool vibe. This place is upscale. It's decorated very well and very nicely. Kind of always judge places by the bathrooms. The men's bathroom is spectacular. It's laid out really, really nice. They've only been open 4 months. So for me and for us, hey, boom, oh yeah, that's nice. Oh, and you tell the folks you're going to show up and then, oh, I forgot. And you never do. No, boom. We executed and jumped on it immediately. Had a great time. The food was great. The vibe was even better. It's a great time.
Tell me about the food though. I saw some pictures and I was really sad I couldn't make it. So can you?
Yeah. So the food is kind of an international spin, or I should say Caribbean. They had jerk chicken. So classic chicken and waffles becomes jerk chicken and waffles. I had a short rib and braised short ribs with roasted potatoes. It was great. They had, so on Saturday and Sunday they do brunch. Sunday is an all-day brunch. So a lot of grits. Shrimp and grits, snow crab and grits, lobster and grits. If you like grits and some seafood, that's the place. That's the place to go. Okay. They have a couple veggie options. I know they have a veggie omelet, and it was varied enough. The menu's not big, or at least for the brunch, it isn't huge, but I think it has something there that'll hit most folks.
Everybody's spot. I appreciate you sharing that. I hate that I missed it yesterday, but glad you guys had a good time. The pictures looked amazing. So, I think me and Ray will hopefully get out there soon. So without further ado, I don't want to spend too much more time on what's in our cups. And I'll tell you what's in mine. It's coffee, because I needed to get the kids back to school today. And then there's that, right? So they've been home for 2 weeks. It's time to get back on the go bus and make it happen. So that was kind of I think they were tired of us, actually. We came back from the gym this morning and they were already dressed and ready to go. So I thought that was our job to like, oh, you guys get up, let's go. No, they were dressed, ready, almost out the door. It wasn't even 7 o'clock yet.
The mutual "I'm tired of you" society.
Yeah, I hope every parent that had a long 2 weeks, I hope they are mutually happy about this day starting. There was actually a little, the whole COVID thing kind of took a blaze through the South Bay over the holiday. So, the kids that are going back to school, even though they would hear about it or talk to their friends, some of their friends caught COVID. I think they were afraid for a minute that the schools might shut down again, but I was very happy that our superintendent kept in touch with us throughout the whole holiday with, hey, I see that this is going on, but I'm letting you know this is what's going on with our district. Hey, I see that, there's been an uptick. This is what we're going to do. So we weren't left in lurch like, okay, on Monday, let's see what happens. Like we knew the whole time what was going to happen with our kids. So Dr. Keller, Redondo Union, thank you for keeping us in the loop about what was going on with our kids. So yeah, good stuff. And today we are bringing on a special guest. He has been here before. I think it's important to say that Marcus never fails to spark a conversation after our conversation. He is a MLK author, MLK scholar. He's an author. He has a couple of books, and I think you even read one. Yeah,
I own one. I haven't gotten through it enough to be talking a lot about it, but I do.
But I think you got a couple spots that we're going to hit on.
Right
and
here. On the show, I bought it the same day. Execute.
Execute, y'all. Get it together. Execute 2020. So he's also my co-host and my co-chair for the MLK celebration here in Redondo Beach that is going to be coming up this month. You ready, Marcus? Dr. Marcus Goodie Goodloe. How you doing,
I'm ready. Sir? I am ready. It is so good to be with you all. Good morning. Happy Monday, the 3rd of January 2022. What is up?
What is up? What's in your cup? What you been up to?
Oh, you're not ready for it. Neither one of y'all are ready for this. Here you go. This is some product placement, DBU, as in Dallas Baptist University. And that's just a whole lot of goodness up in that piece. But no, this is also in my cup. Hold on, wait a minute. Bam. Nothing like a homemade cheesecake with a little chocolate influence on the top for breakfast.
Influence.
I will be taking a bite as I am talking. Here you go.
I love black. You're so black right now. You're so black right now. Just can't take you nowhere.
Let me get another bite in before you ask me a question.
But let me tell y'all, he is so dignified and so always got it together. And you're being so black right now. Just
no. You see the pinkies out. You see.
Did you notice?
He's keeping it super bouge. What you talking about?
And you done got way comfortable on this little platform. I see. Okay, I feel you.
Got my little coffee warmer to keep my coffee hot.
You were speaking this weekend. Where were you speaking, and what were you speaking about?
Had a great time. I was over at a church that's really been a force for good for a number of years. It's called Friendship Baptist Church. They are known also as We Are Friendship. They're in Yorba Linda, California. A guy named Kenneth Curry is the pastor there. His wife, Karima, they are just great human beings. I've done some stuff with them the last couple of years, done some leadership development, spoke to their men's group. But get this, you're not ready for this. Their former pastor, God rest his soul, a guy named Carrington, Bishop Carrington, James Carrington, I think is his first name. 26 years ago, I met that man up in the Bay Area. I was at a church on staff at a church called Allen Temple Baptist Church at the time. And he was a guest speaker for that day. I met Pastor Carrington. He invited me to speak at his church, which was Friendship Baptist Church of Yorba Linda. I came from the Bay Area, spoke. I had gone on a couple of dates with a young lady She and her mom and her sister drove from the LA area, South Bay area, to come hear me speak. We had met in the Bay Area. She came over to hear me speak, both she and her mom and her sister. That woman, 24 years later, has been my wife. My wife, 26 years ago, came to
Wow.
this church to hear me speak. And now, yesterday, I'm preaching there. My wife is there. My daughter, who's 19, is there. And it was called Celebration Sunday. It's a day where they set aside the first of the year to sort of celebrate not only the first year, but also people who have accomplished things like graduation, serving on staff for specific periods of time. So Kenneth Curry is someone I've known for a couple of years. In fact, right before the start of the pandemic, we literally ran into each other in the Holy Land. So he's in Yorba Linda, I'm in South Bay. We're over in Israel right before the pandemic hit in 2020. God rest his soul. Kobe Bryant had just been killed. The pandemic had not yet surfaced. We heard remnants of it. We were in Israel, literally texting each other. Yo, man, I think you're here. I think you're here. And we ended up hanging out in Israel together for a little bit. But yesterday I was hanging out in Yorba Linda, and don't wait for it. It was a good day because my Raiders won and my Lakers won today, yesterday. In the words of the Ice Cube, was a good day.
Yeah, that's a rare Sunday when both of those teams win.
Elon.
Goodie.
What is up?
I want to talk
Cheesecake.
about your book really quick.
Talk
Yeah.
quickly.
Jeez. I can't. So go over with the audience really quick. Kingmaker. What is that book about?
Dr. King was a man who was quite frankly ahead of his time. He was a shepherd to the underdog, who Howard Thurman often describes, a great theologian, says, very few people, unlike, and I use a historic term, Negroes, knew what it meant to live with their backs against the wall. And Dr. King was an advocate, a proponent, a shepherd, a pastor, a priest to these people who were blue-collar workers, who struggled, who labored, professionals, educators, business owners, people who were just trying to have America make good on its promise found in the Declaration of Independence that says we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal. But Dr. King was also a pastor, shepherd to a very unique group of people, athletes and entertainers. In fact, he was the first celebrity pastor, if you will, himself not a celebrity in the sense as we know it today, but he basically pastored these women and men of great influence. I define celebrity as those people who have great resources and influence, who express or yield their talents on big stages, whether in theaters or on baseball fields, right? Football fields. And Dr. King, 50, 60 years ago, was a pastor to these women and men who came alongside him at his calling to help advance the civil rights movement. So the Kingmaker, a person who was never elected to office, but yet who had great sway and great influence with priests, popes, and presidents, also galvanized what he called the coalition of the willing. There were people who were of the mind that what was happening to Black America was not right. And Dr. King felt just because you were successful did not make you sort of immune from engaging in the issues of our day. You'll hear the term people say, "Oh, I'm not political. I don't get involved. I just play football." For Dr. King, that was just, that was being intellectually dishonest and sort of not being real and authentic to the times in which he was living in. And so he felt that everyone had a moral obligation to weigh in on the matters that were before the American conscience. And so Kingmaker is a book that discusses Dr. King's leadership with athletes and entertainers during the civil rights movement. Nina Simone, Charlton Heston, and Harry Belafonte, Sammy Davis Jr., Jackie Robinson, Eartha Kitt, people who were gifted from the stages, but who also use their gifts and talents to help advance the cause to redeem the soul of America. So before Bono, who we know helped to address issues like debt relief, before John Legend, who has used his platform to bring awareness to unjust or sentencings with regard to people in prison, before Alicia Keys used her voice to speak out about AIDS, before Coldplay, the first major music group to commit to a environmentally sort of conscious tour.
Mhm.
No other group has ever done that. We're gonna tour the world and do it environmentally cautious and safe. Anyway, before these athletes and entertainers, LeBron James, more than the vote. I would dare argue that we wouldn't have Joseph R. Biden as president had it not been for LeBron James. I make that argument in my other writings because of his work with More Than a Vote and Stacey Abrams down in Atlanta. So before they were on the scene 50, 60 years ago, you know, people like Sidney Poitier and James Gardner, Elgin Baylor, eventually Muhammad Ali towards the end of Dr. King's life, who they joined together speaking out against the war, this war in Vietnam. And so Dr. King he disturbed the conscience of the nation, but he also challenged people of great influence. Hey, y'all, come with me, get involved to help redeem the soul of America. So Kingmaker is that book where it speaks about those stories, which a lot of people don't know. A lot of people are not aware of the stories that are in that book, what specifically they did, how intricately involved King was in the lives of these athletes and entertainers. I mean, literally serving them, ministering to them, caring for them on personal matters, professional matters, speaking to them in their sort of post-career lives. I'm reminded of a conversation he had with Jesse Owens. Jesse Owens, who, of course, won in the 1936 games, comes back to America. He's not exactly celebrated, has to get on a service elevator to come to his own ticker tape parade, couldn't find a job, didn't even finish school at the University of Michigan, and literally struggled to make ends meet. In fact, he was reduced to literally making money by racing against horses. So, you know, like at Ripley's Believe It or Not, or some of these circuses where you see where they have the come on, step right up, you won't believe your eyes what you're about to see. And Jesse Owens became sort of this caricature where people would come and pay money to see him run against a horse. And Jesse Owens was frustrated, but he also resisted being involved formally in the civil rights movement post his career. And he and Dr. King had a heart-to-heart conversation. There's an image of them talking actually in the airport. And basically, initially, Jesse Owens rejected that and said, that's just not what I want to do. But eventually he talks to King, and King challenges him on getting involved, being cognizant, aware of issues that are beyond sort of the track and field of life, if you will, of his life, of his sport. And later in 1972, several years after Dr. King died, Jesse Owens wrote a little book. You can find copies of it. It's rare. A couple copies left. I have it. I have one. Little teeny book. It's entitled, I Have Changed. I Have Changed. And it's basically Jesse Owens admitting that what Dr. King was trying to get him to engage in and address in terms of the issues of civil rights he was right all along. And so Jesse Owens literally talks about him changing his stance with regard to speaking out about the issues of race and justice in America. So Kingmaker is that discussion. Long response to your question, but that's what Kingmaker is. And it's part of my dissertation. It's what my doctorate is in. I am a King Scholar specifically in relations to his leadership with athletes and entertainers. That's what I wrote about. I spent 4.5 years of my life studying, 5 years of my life studying, getting a degree about.
I'm glad you said that because many people want to know, what's an MLK scholar? There you go.
And they ask it just like that.
And they do. And there you go. One of the reasons I asked, I know Jeff read some of it. I would love to get his take on it. Also, I got a couple questions for you in regards to kind of the state of sports and athletes and racism and stuff. Jeff, you want to talk about the book real quick? The part that you kind of tapped into?
Just wanted to follow up with Marcus on something he said in discussing the book. Do you find it? How do you find it now that most of the connections with King and other celebrities are characterized as if they just happen to be passing each other in the hallway or at a banquet table? It's like, hey, how you doing? That type of stuff. Oh, hey, you guys, did you knew Aretha Franklin knew Martin Luther King, or Sam Cooke knew Martin Luther King. I mean, there's never as you described it, actual connection, any real intimacy.
Oh man, that's good, Jeff. Yeah. Marion Wright Edelman, the president of the Children's Legal Defense Fund, says that we rather celebrate Dr. King than follow him. And I think that's the case in so many instances that people, the deep dive, when you look into the life of Dr. King and his relationship with these entertainers and athletes, some of them sacrificed tremendously. I mean, for example, Eartha Kitt shows up at the White House during the Johnson administration for a celebration honoring the inner city's youth, if you will. This is the height of the Vietnam War. And Eartha Kitt is a guest of the First Lady, Lady Bird Johnson. And she gets to have words about this youth program. And she basically, at the White House, admonishes the Johnson administration and their contemptuous policies about sending Black and brown brothers to fight in Far East Asia, yet dying for a cause in terms of justice and equality for which they did not even receive here in their own nation. Fighting for the rights to fight rather against the Viet Cong. Here we were in the East Vietnam. But yet here in our own country, we're denied such rights. And so literally you can imagine the crowd in that room, including Lady Bird Johnson. Another thing I think about Nina Simone. I think about Dick Gregory. In my research, I've seen the FBI files of Dick Gregory. He was literally the target of unimaginable abuse and sort of attempts to compromise him and to throw him off track with regard to using his platform. Dick Gregory at one point was one of the biggest comedians in America. And then he used his platform to speak out on the issues of justice and equality. I think about Sidney Poitier and Harry Belafonte, who literally went down to Mississippi in 1963 to deliver over $50,000+ cash money to the movement and literally risk their lives. They're in a prop plane, they land, touchdown, they look up in the backwoods there in Mississippi, and they look up and all of a sudden they're being chased, they believe, by the Klan. In the dark of the night, shots ring out over the heads of their vehicle. And Sidney Poitier and Harry Belafonte talk about this harrowing sort of experience. And I think about Mahalia Jackson. I think about people like Jackie Robinson, who was someone. He was really the first African American to have a national sort of contract with a Fortune 500 company. I think it was GM at the time, and how Jackie Robinson used his cachet to speak out on issues in regards to the civil rights. So Dr. King was not, these celebrities and entertainers were not just fans of Dr. King. Many of them were all in terms of their relationship with him. Harry Belafonte, one more quick story. When Dr. King was stabbed in Harlem, in the mid-50s, there's on the book signing. He was at a bookstore actually signing books, was stabbed in the chest by a demented woman who was African-American, actually. Harry Belafonte is on tour, music tour across overseas. He gets wind of Dr. King's injuries. And in the midst of that, discovers that Dr. King, and more specifically, Mrs. King, they're exposed financially, having no insurance. Financial, no death insurance, no life insurance. And so Harry Belafonte, in that moment, takes out a life insurance policy and is the one who pays on that policy. Do you know it was that policy that laid Dr. King in the ground when he met his demise by an assassin's bullet on April 4th, 1968? Harry Belafonte. And so when Dr. King died, he was basically a poor man. He had given his Nobel Peace Prize money away to 3 civil rights organizations. He had less than I think it was something like $6,000 to $7,000 in the bank when he died.
What
And
do you
so when
think about how people have this idea that those that are advocates and right fighters should be poor? Like they really get offended where people find ways to monetize their talent to galvanize people around a cause. And have you had to deal with that?
Well, the scripture says the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Notice the love of money. There is nothing inherently evil about money. Resources are part of what was needed to help the movement. That's why the celebrities and entertainers were so instrumental in the King civil rights movement. What I argue is we would not know the success of the civil rights movement today had it not been for athletes and entertainers. It was Harry Belafonte who raised in excess of $50,000. That money was used in 1963 during the Birmingham campaign, which allowed Dr. King to go to jail to raise the money for bail, not just for himself, but for all those young people who were being jailed. It was Aretha Franklin. It was the Rat Pack with Sammy Davis Jr., Frank Sinatra, who raised money. They would do benefit concerts, raise money. It was Marlon Brando doing dramatic roles on stage, and he would take the proceeds from that money and give it back to the movement. Elgin Baylor, Governor Brown, the father, the senior, Peter Lawford met here in Beverly Hills at a big sort of private event function in Beverly Hills to raise money at the home of Peter Lawford. And everybody who was somebody, a celebrity, shows up at this private home. They raise almost like $70,000. And Dr. King would take that money. Think about it. If you're going to go to jail, you need to get it bailed out. How are you going to get bailed out? If you're going to travel from city to city to raise campaigns, that's what? Hotel costs. That's flight. That's staffing, right? How are you going to get the word out? They're trying to get the word out using newspapers, right? And advertisements, right? And so the resources that were raised, those monies were used to help advance the movement. And that's what I argue in my formal work, my dissertation, that really, I mean, Dr. King was really the sole breadwinner of the civil rights movement for the early stages. And it was really a conversation he had with someone I'm critical of because I felt he could have done more, but Billy Graham, the great evangelist Billy Graham, had a conversation with Dr. King, and it was, this is the term they used at the time. We wouldn't use this term today. The crusades that Billy Graham would use or have in his ministry. He had a conversation with Dr. King. Dr. King was asking him to do more, to speak more, and that Billy Graham never would do a crusade that excluded people of color. But Dr. King felt he could do more. The one thing Billy Graham gave Dr. King was, hey, you know what? You're going to burn yourself out. What was happening was Dr. King was literally the sole breadwinner. He would go from church to church. He would use his book royalties to sort of underwrite the movement. And it was Billy Graham who gave King insight to the crusade model, an arena, bigger event, and the idea of bringing in, for example, it's not just here, come here, Dr. King, it's come here, Dizzy Gillespie, or come here, Aretha Franklin, come here, the Rat Pack, Sammy Davis Jr. and Frank Sinatra, come here, Harry Belafonte. You got to remember, Harry Belafonte at one time had the biggest song in America. Dale, Dale.
Yeah, it was number one for a
It was the
while.
number one song in the world. And so they would have these concert events. Guess what they would do? They would register Black people. They would take the ticket sales money, and then they would use that money to fund the movement.
So how do we segue from that historical perspective into what we now know is diversity and inclusion and the movement around of righting wrongs within the workplace?
Good question. You know, Dr. King said that racism is the white man's shame and the Black man's burden. And that continues to be the case. You know, there's been so much that's happened since the civil rights movement. And I think we're in a post-civil rights era to some respect, but also too, I think the movement continues. You know, there's been a lot of talk about this issue of the critical race theory. You know, we've seen that sort of at the forefront in people's discussions and school boards and different council meetings. Of course, Governor Abbott, the Texas governor, issued an executive order basically dictating what historians, teachers could even advance K through 12 on the subject of critical race theory. Critical race theory is not new. It is a discipline, analytical tool and approach that has been around since the mid 70s, early 80s. And that approach is one that says, listen, we don't look at racism as an event. We look at issues of racial inequity and injustice. They have been part of a persistent sort of structure of policies and laws that have existed post those civil rights laws that were passed in 64, 65. And so the fundamental question that critical race theory asks of scholars is, why is it that racial inequality endures or has persisted subsequent to those laws, like, for example, 64, 65 Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act, housing, et cetera, et cetera. So race is a social construct, and racism not merely is a product or an event or an act of an individual. This issue of racism, or prejudice is something embedded in a system. It's in a structure. It's in policies. It's in laws. And so scholars like Derek Bell, Kimberly Crenshaw, Richard Delgado in the 80s engaged in this conversation around what we now know as critical race theory. It's not a new phenomenon. It's been around. And so when you have, for example, in the 30s and 40s, where officials drew lines around areas deemed poor financial risk. So banks basically said, we're not going to invest in those areas there because poor Black people are too much of a risk. That's an example of something that critical race theory examines. You look at issues related to disproportionate sentencing, for example, and researchers have seen that a lot of those sentencings are based upon things. Some of the mitigating factors include issues related to race. And so critical race theory takes a step back and it looks at not an event, not an episode, but an overall sort of landscape that involves policies, laws, procedures. There's an intentionality within a system. Another person said it was built this way, right? On the issue of racism. So I think where we are today is we're at a crucible moment, in the life and the history of our nation. I think particularly as people of color, we only represent as African Americans less than 13% of this nation's population. Yet, when it comes to issues of incarceration, of even police shootings, African Americans outnumber any other people group with regard to such. And so we have to sort of find our way forward. We do that in partnership, not in opposition to police departments, but in partnership with them, in partnership with private business and entities, education, faith communities, et cetera, et cetera. And Dr. King famously said, basically, we make a commitment to advance forward together as a family, a brother and sisterhood, or we'll eventually experience calamity going our separate ways.
Because we are on the Community Engagement Board together, and you and I both speak about law enforcement issues often, I wanted to ask you about a hot topic that seems to be just really heating up still, which lets me know that people really don't understand the law. The shooting at Burlington Coat Factory.
Oh, yeah.
We spoke about it before, and now they're calling for the firing and charging of this officer that accidentally shot the young girl. I know you and I spoke about it, but one thing I want to be clear about is a lot of times I don't think people understand how things work. And I study criminal justice. I'm obsessed with it. I know when there is a felony being carried out and someone dies because of the felony, the perpetrator, the criminal, actually gets charged with that felony. So it's a felony murder. And had he not been dead, the assailant would have been charged with that murder. There's a law, guys. You can actually look it up. Why would people refuse to understand that and be more excited about this officer getting charged, even though he was saving lives and trying to serve and protect. And I
Yeah.
want your honest, both of you. I would love for you to weigh in on that.
Jeff, I yield to you first, and then I'll go. But yeah, good question.
Well, from everything I've read and I've seen, it appeared that the shooting was accidental, in the sense that the assailant who eventually was killed was not in the area or direct area of where the young girl was shot. And it was really kind of, once he did shoot at the assailant, this bullet goes and hits someone unseen and certainly untargeted. You can't bring someone back because things are accidental or unfortunate. But based on everything I've seen, I fail to see the criminality in what the officer did. It's tragic. It's horrible, but I don't see where there was malicious or reckless intent from the officer in that situation. I've been in quite a few stores over the past handful of months, and I've seen folks come in and snatch and grab and I'm like, well, where's the cops? I'm in a mall with a substation and they don't seem to care. In fact, they've told the patrons, that's not what we do. We're here to play cards or do whatever. I don't know what the hell they're doing. But so those of us citizens who are honest and go and we pay for what we're there for, we want to see some sort of interdiction as this kind of rampant behavior has moved forward. Is it unfortunate? Absolutely. But I don't know enough to even think in terms of this officer being criminally negligent in any kind of way.
Yeah, Tennessee versus Garland, which is a case that officers would know well, cite very often. Tennessee versus Garland, 1985. The Supreme Court held that the Fourth Amendment prohibits the use of deadly force against a non-violent, unarmed felon who is fleeing. But a suspect who is threatening the officer, or there are probable cause to believe that the suspect committed a violent crime, deadly force may be used. And in this instance, all the facts are not out, but I believe these officers believe that the perpetrator was armed, that he certainly had exhibited violent activities, and so in the midst of that, they engaged him tactically. I think it's a tragedy all the way around. A tragedy for obviously this family who had just moved here not long ago, actually to avoid and to flee their country, coming away from violence. I think our President Joseph Biden even talked with the member or with the president of the country. And forgive me, but I forget the country she's from, the family was from. But I know our president talked to their president to express condolences. I look at that officer, and I'm with you, Jeff. I think it's hard. You'd be hard pressed to find any criminal negligence. I do know that every officer has to account for every shot executed in the midst of a sort of a discharging of their weapon. One thing I have heard was from some former officers who are now analysts, and they said that weapon that the officer had is a very high-powered weapon. That the power of that weapon, the capacity of the bullets, it goes through humans, it goes through walls, and so was this a situation where such force was warranted? But hey, I read an article this past week in the LA Times where it talked about in 1997, if you remember, you weren't here, Tonya, but there was a serious bank shootout with our LAPD involving some suspects of a bank who were involved in a Bank of America robbery. And I remember that shooting, but I also remember the article talking about how our police department was literally outgunned. And they talk about the weaponry that was amassed subsequent to that altercation that took place basically on television. But I said all that to say this is a tragedy all the way around. I applaud our officers who serve. Most of them serve valiantly with honor and dignity. But it's a pressure situation. They're coming up on the scene, trying to prevent loss of life. I can't imagine what this family is experiencing. And even then, too, this officer, unimaginable grief. We know that the officer appears to be African American, and so even that is like a dynamic within itself, a dynamic, right? In light of what we've been discussing the last few months. But my heart goes out. I do applaud, lastly, who have I met him? I do applaud Chief Mike Moore, who I think is a stand-up guy. You know, he said what he was going to do when he came into office. He's going to be transparent, upfront. Within 72 hours, that video was released. They were out front, forthright. That doesn't make that pain any less. But I think transparency goes a long way in sort of mitigating some of these issues, navigating through them. And so I believe that, I will say civilly, I think that for all intent and purposes, that there's going to be some compensation significantly given to this family. It won't in any way return their daughter, 14-year-old daughter, who, by the way, was trying on a dress for her quinceañera. In fact, the week this happened, I was literally going to Vegas with a friend of mine. We were going to a game. His daughter just celebrated her quinceañera, of which my wife and son attended. I couldn't go. I was out of town. But it was just, I'm looking at my friend who just celebrated his daughter's quinceañera a couple of months ago and thinking, here this young mother and her daughter were literally preparing for the quinceañera, and that turned a day of tragedy. But I'm thankful for our officers on the whole who act with great valor and courage day in and day out. And it's just a tragic situation all the way around.
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you your thoughts on Torrance and the headlines that they're making these days.
You know, I don't know if you're aware of this one, Jeff, but I have said privately, and now I'll say this publicly, I think the events involving the Torrance Police Department could possibly be the biggest scandal, certainly in California policing, if not our nation, since Rampart's division fiasco in LAPD. It is heartbreaking. I'm very disappointed. You know, it's often, I've been personally accosted by members of the police department. I've had conversations, intense ones, with members of the police department in various judicial jurisdictions about my outspokenness and engaging on some of these issues. And I tend to, I see myself as a bridge builder, but I also see myself as someone who has willing to speak honestly about these issues. It's amazing how dearth in terms of the conversation, how silent departments are with regard to some of these issues when their own women and men who serve in that same profession are. You know, I'm not saying you should speak for all the facts, but I am saying we know enough now that the California State's Attorney General has launched a formal investigation on this matter as of last week, December the 8th, a couple of weeks ago, rather. California Attorney General Robert Bonta has announced an investigation in this. Over 12 officers. We believe there could be more based upon the LA Times, which I would consider award-winning piece, has uncovered. There are literally hundreds of cases possibly that could be compromised as a result of some of these officers and what they're accused of. So when you factor in the magnitude of this, and oh, by the way, the potential arrests that they've been involved in, cases they've been involved in, notwithstanding the comments that were allegedly made, racial epithets, some of the abuse, I think we've only touched the surface. And the alarming part is some of these officers, I know 2 officers personally who I have a personal relationship with. One is both are former now. One most recently, I won't give their names. One left the department 6 months ago, unrelated to these issues. I know of 2 officers who know of those officers accused. And the one thing that concerns me is, what about transfer officers? Where are some of these officers today? Are they still with the force? Were there members who were of this department who are now members of other departments? And as citizens, we have there's no sort of insight into the history of those officers. Where are they? What's their jackets in terms of their personnel files on some of these issues with regard to complaints, et cetera, et cetera. In the same way that officers should be celebrated and applauded, they should be held to higher standards. They have the power from the state to take your life. And the courts are giving officers broad latitude to execute justice, literally, and in some cases on the streets. And we're thankful for our officers. But you know what? Officers are not immune from criticism. They're not immune from being examined.
They're
You know, that
humans. And
they're
part of that,
humans.
part of the
They're
work
not
that we do.
infallible. Officers are not
Yeah.
infallible. If you go to a bad restaurant, you know what you'll do, Jeffrey, when you leave? In fact, you were telling us about this restaurant you
Kai's.
went to. I'm going there. I've already texted my wife. We're going to go to Kai's. You know why? Because Jeffrey gave a good recommendation. So we'll talk about a bad restaurant or a good restaurant. We'll talk about a good dentist or a bad dentist. We'll say, hey, man, don't use that guy or that woman as your accountant. She was terrible. But for some reason, we have this notion because you have a badge and a gun, you can't be criticized. That's some reason I can't be supportive of Black Lives Matter as well as supportive of a police department. Those two are not mutually exclusive.
Right.
Good cops should reject bad cops.
Period.
Good cops should embrace things like the 21st Century Police initiatives that were put together by President Obama's Blue Ribbon Commission in 2014, subsequent recommendations made in 2015. You ought to want to be accountable. Wear a body cam. Give statistical analysis or give statistics with regard to stops and arrest. Good police departments don't shrink back from these. I know good, honorable, decent chiefs of police who I have relationships with. One good one who I know I'm very good friends with, Robert Luna, who's retiring. Long Beach, runs the 7th largest police department in all the state of California. $250 million budget. And this is a man who operates with valor and character and courage and is transparent. And so I'll say this, good police departments should not shrink back from accountability.
I will let anyone that's listening know this, especially if you're in Southern California or the South Bay. Even as of 2020, there was an article in the Daily Breeze. Several South Bay cities have discriminatory sundowning laws still. Now, listen, I have not been in Southern California as long as y'all have, but what I do know, I sat on a panel with Assemblyman Mersucci about 2 years ago, and one of his first questions is, do you think Torrance is racist? Keep in mind, I'm still new to the South Bay. I was like, absolutely. Have you seen some of the posts and messages that even some of the city council people have posted publicly? Absolutely. I said it, not in secret, in public, and I meant it. But you have to understand, I understand that there are also laws still on the books that are discriminatory. They're racist. I don't want my kid hanging out there without plenty of eyes on him because I don't trust it. And that's not okay. And it didn't say one. So even though Torrance is on the hot seat, it didn't say one. Let's be clear. Several South Bay cities still have discriminatory laws. So what Gia and I usually say is, now is a good time when things aren't heated to start doing some of the homework and finding out what kind of laws are on the books. Find out what the transparency is with the department and start working towards some of those changes that you want to see. Don't wait until things heat up and get out of control, and then you want to scream and holler. No, scream and holler now. Be very strategic about what it is that you want. Look at it, analyze it, and then come back with others to support and get these things changed. If you're not going to work to change them, don't complain about them, okay? I just stay out of Torrance, so that's just, that's just me. What has been your experience with Torrance since you're from here?
Yeah. You go in and shop and you leave. Delamo Fashion Center and go.
And out.
I'm gonna be honest with you. There's certain places that have had reputations for being unfriendly or less friendly to Black folk. So you just kind of know where they are and you don't go there. it's Fullerton is a city like that. It's had a reputation of harboring Klan activities and being very uncompromising as it relates to people of color, particularly Black folks. And now, real or imagined, you just you learn. It's sort of like the green book of activity. No,
Right.
we didn't have a green book to say don't go to this place or go to other, here or there, but you learn that along the way. There are just certain places that are not friendly, so you don't go and you don't frequent there. You don't. I mean, there's.
But on the opposite side, I'm sure there's some of them that wouldn't want to be in some of our communities.
Well, when it comes to familiarity, always a lack of familiarity will always put folks in situations where they feel uncomfortable. And I say that for myself, someone who's lived primarily on the West Side, certainly as an adult. I get over on the East Side, I'm not as comfortable. It's not because I feel like I'm under threat. It's because I don't know the lay of the land. And one of the things that we learn, particularly as Black folks, is you need to understand the schematic of the neighborhood you're in, because there's safety in understanding that you can't just simply go. And that's in communities that we would consider safe. We don't, safe in terms of statistical safety and lack of threats. No, I don't know the neighborhood. It's funny. When we first moved up in the Mid-Wilshire area, and Gia had just been promoted and she was working shifts. So there was a period from Friday afternoon to Sunday morning that I was alone because she did a double. And I'd be out walking the neighborhood and the whole bit. And I would joke like this time of year in the fall that I wouldn't walk after dark in Hancock Park. And folks were like, why? It's safe. I said, they don't know me. I need to walk in the summertime when the neighborhood can see me and know who I am, and I can wave to the neighbors, and there's the familiarity, because in Hancock Park, there's not, it's one of the darker communities after dark. They don't have a lot of light in the whole bit, and I don't want some random, hey, what are you doing in this neighborhood? Is that real or imagined? It's real because I imagined it.
But listen, that just shows that you have a higher level of emotional intelligence and situational awareness, and people just seem to lack that. So it's not always, am I being racist? It's, I'm not comfortable with this, and I don't know if they're comfortable with me because it's unfamiliar. That is a higher level of situational awareness, which people seem to lack on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking, I wrote an article recently about professionalism. Sometimes people just aren't taught certain things. You would think that they could adapt as they got older and had more experience, but it ain't happening. So sometimes we need to teach people how to act and teach people how to be safe and teach people how to introduce themselves. My husband and I right now, my son brings his friends over to the house. Ray is teaching other people's kids how to walk in our home and say, hi, Mr. McKenzie. Hi,
Exactly.
Mrs. McKenzie. Like, come on.
Is your name on the mortgage? You just
And then they
in here
looking at us like
own
we're
the place.
Like, well, where are we at right now? Who raised you? But same situation when people go into areas and communities, you are not familiar with them. They are not familiar with you. It's okay to have a introduction period where they get to know you. You introduce yourself. It used to be a thing when people would move into a neighborhood, they would introduce themselves to the neighbor. It's not a thing anymore, I guess.
Oh, no. No.
So I don't know. But before we get out of here, Marcus and I are working on the third annual. Last year was virtual, but this year will be live. Third annual MLK celebration for Redondo Beach Police Department's Community Engagement Board, my co-host and co-chair. And I wanted to take a minute to tell you about it and why you should come out.
Well, we're excited about it. It's going to be the 17th of January, 2022. It's going to be held at the Redondo Union High School right here in Redondo Beach, California, 3 to 5 p.m. We have the creative expressions up the wazoo. We have artists like Soul Fruit is going to be with us, a great group from Houston who are some friends of mine. We're going to have Ashley Chanel and her amazing band. We have some spoken word. My boy Be Honest is going to drop some words. We have a dance troupe. We have some readings that are going to take place. Our mayor will speak. Our chief of police, Keith Kaufman, will be sharing as well. We have some other surprises, of course, that will be on hand for that day. And so we're really pumped about it. We're hoping that this strain of Omicron COVID will not dampen.
What did you call it?
Huh? Is it Omicron COVID? Did I get it wrong?
Omicron.
Huh? No, no. Where I'm from is Omicron. Omicron. And but anyway, we're hoping that doesn't sort of put a damper on our day, and we're hoping we'll get it off. But anyway, we've had this 3 years in a row now. Last year was virtually, as Mackenzie mentioned, and the first year was outdoors. And but yeah, we want everyone to be there. It's going to be 3 to 5 on the 17th of January. Be there. It's a great way to celebrate, honor Dr. King. We're so thankful for our police department and their leadership coming alongside to help make this event an impactful one. To my knowledge, it's really the only one of its kind.
Yeah. It is. And it'll probably be the last time for anyone that has had the opportunity to meet him or interact with him. We'll have Chief Kaufman on the mic. So yeah, he's retiring, and it'll be some new leadership, and we'll see how everything shakes out. But come out and celebrate the good work that he's done. And it's because of him and Naylor that we're even able to have this event. They've supported it 110%. So definitely want to come out, celebrate him, and catch Tonya and Goodie on the mic.
Yeah, we love to see you all there. Jeff, it's been fun, man, hanging out with you. I'm sorry for that little glitch earlier, but hey, stuff like that happens in the midst of what it happens. But I'm really grateful to get a chance to hang out with you. And of course, Tonya, thanks so much for inviting me. And really just really will leave your listeners with this. I think, as I mentioned, we're in a crucible moment. Not only within respect to the African American community, but I think also our nation. We're coming up on the anniversary of January 6th, for example, of this horror event that took place, an assault on not only our democracy but on law enforcement. Mm-hmm. I used to be in arguments sometimes with members of the law enforcement community who, Tonya personally, talking about how organizations like Black Lives Matter, terrorist organization, or I remember just thinking to myself, no, that's not true. Our
no
FBI,
matter how many times you say it.
Yeah, FBI Director Wray said the clear and present danger of which our country faces now are white supremacists. And I would argue that it's not only white supremacists, but it's also those groups that have intertwined themselves with their pronounced Christian faith and the distorted views of an ideology with regard to politics that launched a 4-hour attack on our nation's capital, where women and men who are in blue fought for their lives. There is no video on this side of heaven that exists where you see people of color, African Americans, most recently affiliated with the social justice advancements on things like police accountability, transparency, et cetera. So when you have images of people in streets fighting with officers, just doesn't exist. And so I'm heartbroken. I am devastated. I am frustrated at how we have gotten to this point, and how members of this society who call themselves, quote, patriots, have acted with impunity and have brought great shame to this nation for all the world to see. And in the name of politics, a distorted ideology for the man who once held that office. And over 700 people have been charged with crimes from that day, where women and men, I did an interview this past summer with a Capitol police officer. He's a sergeant. I did it in Washington, D.C. as part of my teaching and lecturing that I do on behalf of Dallas Baptist University. And I watched that man tell the story of that day as my students watched him. And the emotions 5-6 months out were still raw and palpable. You know, I visited those halls of Congress yearly. I take a group of students there and we visit as part of our lecture series we do there. And you can't even go on the House floor without a jacket. You gotta have a jacket. It's part of the decorum. There are literally places in the Capitol where you can't even take a photo because of the decorum and the lighting and the picture. That picture there is 200 years old. You can't, the flash from above will injure it. Members of this nation went into that Capitol a year ago coming up and defecated on the floors, urinated on the floors, used a flag to punch and spear police officers, pepper spray, bear spray. And so we need to remember it's a time in our history, as former President Roosevelt said, we're living infamy. And I know this, that it will take all of us, people of goodwill, to push back against those forces of hatred, of vitriol and violence, couched up in the name of white supremacy and a distorted view of democracy and this ideology that advances hate and division. And so I'm hoping that MLK Day, as we celebrate his day, the dreamer, the drum major for justice, that we will remember that the work continues to become that beloved society. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. What do you have coming up? Anything else you have coming up? How can people keep in touch with you?
For more about me, Jeff, you can meet me at Ray's Kitchen, or what is it? Ray's Kitchen? Ray's Cafe?
Kai's Table.
Kai's Table. We're going. All right. That's number one. Number two, go to GoodieGoodloe.com. GoodieGoodloe.com. GOODIE. Goodloe. GOODLOE. GoodieGoodloe.com. I am on my way to the Bay Area, your neck of the woods, at the end of the month. Antioch. I'll be up there. I'm on my way to New Mexico, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, this month as well. I'm going to go up to Santa Barbara the beginning of February. I'll be here with you for MLK weekend. And then also, too, I'll be here in the South Bay with my own church, Flourishing Church, speaking as well. For all this and more information, you can go to GoodieGoodloe.com and find out where I'm going to be next.
All right. Anything you got to share, Mr. Sneed, before we get out of here?
Well, on behalf of the Mahogany Box, I wanted to just let the viewers know that mahoganybox.com is new and launched, and we're executing our execute strategy. No events, no vending and pop-ups.
No catering?
No, but I'm working on an event that we'll be talking about soon, and it's going to be an event that celebrates African influence in American cooking.
Oh, yes. All right. Yeah. Well, I can't wait for that. For anything PR and branding, you guys always check out Sand and Shores. Sign up for your strategy session if you're trying to figure it out for 2020. Execute on your 2020 plan. You can always do that. So on all platforms, Sand and Shores or Tonya McKenzie PR. Listen, thank you guys for being here. Hopefully we see you out at the event or virtually somewhere. Continue to support, stay connected, stay enlightened, stay